Welcome everybody to a brand new episode of IDTALK4ED Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Sarfo-Mensah. And if this is your first time tuning into the podcast, I welcome you and I hope that today's episode is one that you will enjoy and will have you come back for more. And if you're a returning listener or viewer of the podcast, as always, I welcome you back and I hope that today's episode is one that you find informative, enlightening, and of course, insightful. So before we get into the main event for today, just a reminder, if you are on YouTube, make sure you hit that red subscribe button so you can get future notifications on new episodes of the podcast. And if you are listening from Apple Podcast or Spotify, make sure you subscribe there as well. Also, if you are looking to donate to our platform, make sure you donate to the following platforms here. Cash App, where our handle is $, and then Venmo, where we have our handle at Kwame SM. That's at symbol KWA. Ooh, can't even spell my own name. At KWAMESM. And to listen to past episodes of the podcast, you can go to our main website at IDTALK4EDucators.com. Thank you for your support. Now, typically with this podcast, I don't usually have repeat guests come because I'm trying to talk to as many different phenomenal individuals as possible. But today, I had to make an exception. I had today's guest, can't remember what episode number it was, but it was probably in the 50s as far as episode numbers. But about 80 episodes ago, I had this guest and we just had a phenomenal conversation about identity, about how pre-service teachers need to discover who they are and explore who they are while they're still trying to form that teacher identity before they enter the classroom. And now, fast forward to almost 2 years later since that interview, she's gone on to release her debut book, Woven Together, which we're going to talk about, just released yesterday, I believe. I just can't wait to talk about this book and just the journey she's been through since our last conversation. So without further ado, I want to bring out today's guest. Actually, I want to welcome back our guest for today, Dr. Courtney Elizabeth Rose. So let's bring on Dr. Rose to talk with us again about what she's going through. Had through the E in there.
Yeah, no, I'm saying thank you for putting respect on the Elizabeth. It's actually something that people don't know, but that middle name is quite meaningful for me. And when I do name story activities in my courses, I share the meaning. I'm given to me by my maternal grandmother, and it's very special because we lost her pretty early in my life, and so it's a bond that I have with her. So I appreciate the calling out of that name because it called her in to the room for this conversation. So,
and just to give context for those who didn't watch our first conversation a couple years back. So in preparing for that first interview, Courtney was telling me, like, we got to put some respect on the E, my middle initial. I said, all right, bet. So we did that first time around. This time around, we said, all right, so we're going to talk about identity. Let's reveal the whole middle name. Yeah. So that required doing some more extensive research on my end. And boy, did I dig up some good stuff that I'm excited to share today. I dig up some good stuff, which is perfect for our conversation. So I know last time when you came, you talked about how you got into education. I'm not going to do that with you. People can watch your first interview and learn about that. But I do want to focus on your parents. I want to start there. Mm-hmm. Particularly your mom, Dr. Patty Rose. Because when you're talking about identity, figuring out who you are, I think you had the sweetest deal. And And the why I say that, I'm going to just read off just the resume of Dr. Patty Rose, because I think people need to understand where I'm coming from with this as I was doing my research. So just give me a second, because there's just so much good stuff. So let's start with the fact that your mother has a master's of public health and MPH, just like my wife. Shout out to my wife. Just like you, Ivy League educated, did her master's at Yale, ended up doing a doctorate at Columbia, just like you did.
Mm-hmm.
Her footsteps, right? And then she's written for several major platforms, written for the Huffington Post and others, has authored a dozen books and counting, has traveled the world, over 50 countries, worldly, and just has a thirst for learning. Even now, she still is trying to learn and better herself, which doesn't stop. Like, she is the ultimate embodiment of what an educator is. But just to have that Black woman as your mother, being able to grow up to see that. And then listen, shout out to your father too, Mr. Jeffrey, because we're not going to leave him out. But the fact that you had both of your parents married for almost 4 decades, 38 years exact. That's beautiful. I don't think people understand the essence of that and just how significant it is as you're trying to weave these different parts of your identity together. So I said a whole lot to start off. So I want to give you a chance to just talk about the impact that your mother, Dr. Patty Rose, specifically had in helping you weave together your educated identity. Let's start there.
What a beautiful place to start. And I just recently did a book talk, and that is exactly where I started as well. So because I think it's impossible to talk about the book and my own identity without going back. I often say, like, my teacher identity is woven into my DNA, right? I come from a long line of educators, both formal and informal. But my mother was the one whose journey I got to see the most closely and the most consistently, right? And my father as well, but we'll touch on that in a little bit because he's one of the featured teachers in the book. But my mother, so I'm Dr. Rose as well, and they call me often Dr. Rose the Remix, right? Because I've followed so closely in her path, but just taken some little detours or different routes along the way. So yes, we both went to Columbia and earned the same degree in EDD, but I got mine in curriculum and teaching, and hers was in health ed. My first position is at the same university where her first position as a professor is, FIU. She was on one campus in the public School of Public Health. I'm on the other campus at the School of Ed. So, it's been a thing. But I used to sit in her classrooms because she would sometimes my brother and she would bring us onto campus with her. And my brother would go to the kids, care center or whatever, and he would go there. And I would sometimes say, Mom, can I go with you to class? And she would say, sure. And so I'd sit in the back and watch her and just see her moving with so much power and so much grace, and just feel how she was like building the energy in the room and creating that energy in the space. And I just thought, at that time, like, oh my goodness, this is magic what she's doing. Like, at home, she's my mom and she's powerful and graceful there as well, but different. It's different. It was watching her there. I was like, what is this? And I write in the book that I used to pray, like, whatever that is, I just want a little bit of it. If I could just have a little bit of that, that would be great. And, but as I've gotten older and I've gotten to know my mom differently, more deeply, and as I've gotten to know myself differently and more deeply, I realized that my mom has always been fueled by a very deep, passionate love for herself, for her family, and for her community. And that drives every single thing that she does. Every single thing comes from this space of love. that's just woven into who she is. And one of her recent publications was actually a book that she self-published called A Return to Black Love, in which she professes this love for Black people, the Black community, Black partnership, Black relationship, Black education, right? And she builds it out. And this is who raised me, right? This is who guided my steps and all of that. And so it's ingrained in me very deeply. And so I really, God answered my prayers, and she really did pass on, this love and this commitment to doing things from love at all times into me. And so that's what drives me as well. And I think that's a direct gift from her and the partnership that I got to see between her and my father as well.
Oh, see, I wasn't trying to do that. I'm gonna be teary-eyed now. Oh man. But that's just beautiful. That's beautiful. And I think we need to hear more counter stories.
Mm-hmm.
Like the one you're sharing right now about your parents and just the impact that they've had. Because we don't hear that enough, particularly amongst us in the Black community. We don't hear enough of those counter stories, and we need to get those out there.
Yeah.
Now, of course, as we're trying to shape our identities, there are things that happen in our childhood and upbringing that play a major role in that. And I want to talk about some of the ups and downs that you may have gone through, particularly within your K-12 schooling. So we know what that's like in general as Black folks going through this schooling process in America. But I want to know from you, just based on your schooling, what were some of the internal or external struggles that you dealt with in embracing who you are and just showing up as your authentic self in school and beyond?
Yeah, so I actually, by the time I was in fourth grade, I had been to 3 different elementary schools in 3 different states. So because we moved once to be closer to family, and then we moved once because my mom's job brought her an opportunity that she could not turn, or her work brought her to an opportunity that she couldn't turn down, and it brought us down here to Florida.
Okay.
So by the time I was in 4th grade, I had gone to school in New York, Connecticut, and then Florida. And Florida was, it was different. It was not what I was expecting, in many beautiful ways and many challenging ways. It wasn't until I got to Florida, and it might just be because of how old I was and I was paying attention to these things, or I was more aware of these things, or I was more self-conscious about these things, right? Just because of the natural development that happens in children and in people. But people began to make comments to me about how I talked and how I got the question, what are you, so many times in my life. And a lot of that has to do with, I think, the demographic makeup of the community where I lived. I lived at the time in a city called Pembroke Pines, Florida, which was rapidly diversifying at that time. It had been probably more predominantly white, but it was just rapidly diversifying at the time. And so folks were looking at me and like, well, she looks Black, but is she Black? And the way she talks doesn't fit our stereotypical perception of what Blackness is. And it was very messy and dirty and hurtful because I was 9 years old and people were constantly asking me, what are you? And I didn't really understand what the question was at first and why people were asking me this question. But it was something that I got asked the remainder of my K through 12 schooling, the remainder, from students, teachers, even sometimes, what are you? And so I would I'm Black. Well, you don't sound like you're Black. You don't talk Black. I had one of my white friends straight up tell me, I talk more Black than you. And it was these kinds of experiences that was just like very jarring for me, because I came from a home where we talked very openly about being Black in my home, and wasn't something my mom skirted around. Like, no, you are a Black woman, you are a Black girl. She wasn't ever very shy about that at all. Like, no. When you know who you are a Black girl. I am a Black woman. Your father is a Black man. And so I was very deeply rooted in that. Like, I'm a Black girl. I'm going to grow up and be a Black woman. I was very not shy about that at all. Like, oh, what am I? I'm Black, like, but then I became concerned about, well, am I Black enough? Right? Am I doing something that's making people call my Blackness into question? And so that was the battle that I went through my entire, I would say it hit most heavily in high school, or the end of middle school and the start of high school. And it was tough because I
can imagine.
Yeah, it was confusing too. But my mother was not wavering on it. My mother, I would say, the people tell me that I don't talk Black enough. And she would say, I don't know what that means. So, are you a Black woman? Yes. Are you talking? Yes. Well, then you're talking like a Black, and that would be the end of the conversation. And so I would just move on and say, like, okay. And obviously now that I have the understanding and the language, I can unpack what I was experiencing at that time and understand it, but then realize that there were no teachers to help facilitate that conversation, or to help that I felt comfortable enough to go to. And when I was in that school building, have that conversation with them and say, like, I don't feel like I'm able to fit in anywhere here, because I'm too Black for the white kids, but I'm not Black enough for the Black kids. And where am I supposed, like, I'm just kind of flailing around here. And the teachers that we had at that time, many of them were kind of unwilling to tiptoe into those conversations with us. The school was very diverse, but very segregated in terms of where you would find everyone hanging out or even taking classes. And it was just something that and we never talked about it.
Interesting. Yeah. And I dealt with some of those same struggles too, growing up, coming from a family of parents who came from Ghana, emigrated from there to come to the States.
Yeah.
So I knew about my Ghanaian heritage and how that had an impact on me. But what was interesting was when I was going to school, Black kids would tease me because my name wasn't an English name. It was fully Ghanaian. And then of course the white kids would get on me because I was Black, but that wasn't Black enough for the Black kids. So I was in like that conundrum. But what's interesting about our journeys, even though they're different, but at the same time similar, is that there are moments in our journey where we had to negotiate parts of who we needed to be in the different spaces we were in. So I want to fast forward to when you started teaching, right? And as Black people, we typically go into education already having a perception of how we're supposed to present ourselves in the classroom, in the school setting. So I'm wondering, as you were going through that process, was there a turning point where you just said, you know what, I'm gonna just stop doing all this and just be me?
Yeah.
So when you just decided, I'm just gonna stop negotiating who I'm gonna allow to show up, what parts of my identity are gonna show up, and I'm just gonna be my full self at all times?
Probably going into my second year. So I was actually fired or let go at the end of my first year of teaching. I tell the whole story in the introduction of the book, but we were a turnaround school that year in the first school that I was originally working in. And one of the efforts that they put into place was to force the principal to let go of a very large number of teachers. And I'm not really sure how she chose who to let go to this day, but she called me in and she said, I have to let you go because of this reason. But then I write in the book, I'll never forget what she said to me. And I'm going to have to paraphrase because it's been some years. But she ultimately said, and she wasn't talking about the school itself, but the district wide, but she was saying, you have something special. Don't let this place kill it. Right? You have something special.
Wow.
And it really hit me that she said that, because I had felt that whole year that I was doing exactly what you said, trying to be what they wanted me to be. And I was never making the mark because all of it just felt wrong and felt like it was putting more distance between me and my kids. And then I started thinking, well, if this place, whether she's talking about the school or the district itself, is killing something in me or has the potential to do that, what's it doing to our kids? And what are we doing for them? And so that was the moment that I was like, you know what? If I keep trying to fit in to whatever this is, whether that's the school I'm working for or the community I'm in or the district that I'm a part of, I might always find myself becoming a part of a system that is killing things in me and the kids I'm here to serve and educate. And so I have to stand 10 toes down in who I am at all times, even if that puts me occasionally in opposition to what's going on or what the dominant movement is or what the dominant perspective is, because I don't want to kill anything in me. But more importantly, my job, the work that I've taken on, the work that I feel like is what I've been put on this earth to do, is to bring out the best in people, not to tamper it, not to kill it. And that requires me to do that for myself first.
Wow.
And so that was the moment that it happened.
Wow. And you know what? Shout out to that principal, because most principals wouldn't do that in that situation. She recognized your potential and she recognized that you had a gift. And she recognized that it was being stifled in that environment. Now, she's saying that to you. I'm wondering, as a principal, what she was going through to try to get that school back up to the standard that it needed to be at. So yeah, that's just a wow. Shout out to that principal. Because that's not a common thing. I don't think people realize that.
No. And you've actually reframed that whole thing for me in this moment. And I'm very grateful to you for saying that. You know me, I'm going to make my reflections known, but you have reframed that entire thing for me. Because I think one of the perspectives that was challenging for me to take in that year and ever since has been hers. And I think that you have, because ultimately she was placed elsewhere as well at the end of that year. And a lot of that probably had to do with the fact that she was doing so much that folks weren't very happy with her about doing, in the name of her staff or her faculty, in the name of her students. So
yeah,
I appreciate you for saying that and bringing me into her perspective on all of it as well.
Right. Because just like you, I ended up being let go after my first year of teaching. I was in a charter school in Philly, teaching 6th grade math. And the principal at the time was under a lot of pressure. And like you, I was doing everything, a lot of great things. And of course, I'm making my mistakes. I'm a rookie teacher. I'm going to make some mistakes along the way. For the most part, I felt like I was doing a pretty good job. So much so that 2 months prior to being let go, the principal gave me a contract offer to come back the next year. So this is April. He's doing that. And then June comes, he's giving me this document in his office saying I have to sign it to rescind that offer because the board decided that I need to be let go.
Wow.
And he knew he was wrong because he had that guilty look on his face. But I also felt like he was saving face so that he could keep his job, because I felt like with the board, it was either going to be him or me. And he did what he had to do for himself. That's where I lost respect for that man. But of course, that was almost 15 years ago. I've moved on from men. I've done pretty well for myself. So, I ain't tripping. It just started. It just ignited a fire and started this journey that I've been on ever since. I want to stay on this for a second because you are in the state of Florida. There's been a lot going on
Just a lot.
We don't need to go into. I'm particularly interested in exploring this idea of just maintaining our cores as teachers and our identities, right? Because we have lots of teachers and students who are coming to our school buildings with these intersectional identities, right? Whether we're talking about race, whether we're talking about gender identity, sexual orientation, language, you can name all the identity markers you can think of. I'm just wondering, in this current climate, how can teachers authentically show up and be themselves while these laws that are suppressing who they are being enacted? And not just by the red states, Republican or conservative states. I mean, even in some of the blue states or the quote unquote progressive states, you're seeing remnants of this taking place. How do we still show up and be who we are in this dangerous time?
I feel like that's always a tricky question to answer, right? Because I think that it also depends on where you are in your level of connection with and comfort with those pieces of yourself, right? In the book, I call them your power chords, right? It's those things that they tell you. It might be connected to great pain, or it might be connected to the greatest joy you've ever experienced. It might be connected to the people who love you the most unconditionally in your life, or it might be what you think of when you say, I am unapologetically this, right? But there are also those things that folks have often told us are too much or not enough, right? Or too big or too small, or we've learned to tuck them away because they make us stick out in a way that has maybe been uncomfortable or drawn attention that at a time made us feel like, what is this, right? And so I think you first need to reflect on what are those pieces of me that I feel unsafe bringing in, and what are those connected to from my own K through 12 journey? Because I think what teachers maybe aren't prepared for is that when we go back into the classroom to teach, oftentimes those feelings that we felt as kids sitting in classrooms resurface.
Right.
And so now we can respond in a couple of ways. One way might be, well, I remember what this is like, so I'm going to be the exact opposite of that. We're going to go overboard in that direction, and we have to we maybe sometimes have to balance it out. That was me. Okay, I went a little too far. And then we have folks who sort of take that as like, well, now I'm the one in this seat, so I went through it, so now I'm going to make sure that I prepare this next group to come through and go through it. And they kind of become the people that they didn't want to become, right? Just because the space awakens that in them. And so I think it requires first a lot of reflection on, well, who am I? And how does that enhance? How is that required? How is that a necessary component in doing my work the way that it needs to be done? And those are the things that we have to sit with, right? What pieces of myself are necessary, are not negotiable in order for me to do this work and give my students what they deserve. Also, what messages does it send to my students that if I'm hiding pieces of myself, now I've created a space where they may feel, well, this was the space where I could come and be who I am as well. But now I'm watching this person come and tuck pieces of themselves away. So now I got to tuck pieces of myself away. It's challenging because we're not doing this work in silos. We're not doing this work alone. And so I also say, build your team, build your collective, because you might think you're the only person in that building that's experiencing this. And this is one of the things that when I hear people talking about, what's happening in states like Florida and other places around the country, you forget that there's a network of people who are out here sometimes who are trying to combat these things and who are moving and working. And it's just, we forget that sometimes. And so find those networks. They exist, where there are people who you can go to and, have support, have resources, have guidance. You're not in this alone. And I think one of the things I hope folks fight in that process is this feeling of I'm doing this by myself, because that's what often leads us to take the steps back. And so just remember, there are people in every state, even in every school building. You might not know that you all are there, but you can see each other. You can find each other. And some of that just by asking that one question in the staff meeting or in the faculty meeting that lets people know, ooh, there's another one who's thinking on the space that I'm thinking. So that's what I would often do. I would just ask a question, like, this is just a question just to let somebody know, oh, Courtney's thinking about this. I'm thinking about this too. Boom, boom. That's a person that I can link up with, because if we go this journey alone, sometimes it's easier to get knocked down. We have to do this work collectively. And I know that was a very muddy answer to your question, but it's because it's a muddy situation that we're in. We take 10 steps forward and it's always, there's something else. So there's not a clear cut answer to that. And I'm always skeptical of folks that have one, because it makes me feel like they might not have dug into the complexities of the reality of the situation.
So this season, Identity Talk for Educators Live will be including ad spots for businesses, products, and events that are adding significant value to their communities. And here's the catch. You don't have to be an educator or an education-based business to be a part of this. We're looking for people who are just doing great work in the community, and we want to use our platform as a way to amplify their work. So if you are an entrepreneur or you know of an entrepreneur who is doing just that, bring them in our direction. Have them reach out to us. If they want to learn more about their ad spots and how they can get themselves promoted on this platform, they can contact myself, Kwame at identitytalkforeducators.com. I'll say it one more time. It is Kwame at identitytalkforeducators.com. Hope to hear from you, and let's keep on amplifying our work and building each other up. And you know what? I feel like our ancestors called this years ago. And I want to talk about just the phenomenal James Baldwin. We got to talk about his talk to teachers, which was 60 years ago. 60 years ago. And I'm going to paraphrase, but he just basically says, when you are doing this work, this activist work as educators, where we're fighting for liberation and fighting for students to be seen.
Yeah.
We got to be prepared for the most determined and the most powerful resistance that's going to come from that. He talks about resistance, and this is why that talk is so powerful. Every teacher education program should read James Baldwin's Talk to Teachers, because it just pretty much speaks to the times we're in. But most importantly, it reminds us that resistance is something that's going to be expected when we're doing this work.
Yep.
We're going to encounter resistance, but that should not be a reason to deter ourselves from doing what's right by kids. And it's tricky, because if you actually do that, you're risking your livelihood, you're risking your career, depending on what state, what county, what district you're in. So it's not a clean cut answer like you're saying. It's going to be a very muddy answer. But I think it's something that we have to think about more than ever, is our morals and principles.
100%.
And that speaks perfectly to your book, Woven Together, which finally dropped yesterday, I believe.
Yes, December 12th.
Yeah. So let's talk about Woven Together, because it's a book that I think is right on time, considering everything that we've talked about thus far. I want you to just share the inspiration behind writing this book, which you've been talking about in pieces throughout, and then just the journey that it took for you to even get it to completion, because we know as authors, when you're writing that manuscript and going through the editing process, it is emotional and physical labor all rolled into one. So just talk to us about that.
So I actually didn't start out wanting to write a book. I was just like, I need to write.
Really?
I had a lot in me. I was going through, I was a year or so into my current position at the university where I am now. And I have a huge course load, 4 classes in each fall and spring and 3 in the summer. It's just huge. And so there was a lot of stuff going on in the world. And I was just, writing is where I go. My mom gave me my first journal when I was, I don't know, 7. And so writing is always where I go when the world feels overwhelming. And so I just started writing. And one spring break, I just was like, I'm just going to write every single day. I'm not going to put any pressure on. I'm just going to write. And these little stories started coming out, like stories about different stages in my life and different stages specifically connected, different moments in my educational journey. And I just kept writing about them. And the lessons learned, or just how they made me feel about myself, what I learned about myself, what I learned about teaching, what I learned about education. And I just started writing these stories. And I got somebody reached out and was like, hey, do you want to write a book? And I was like, okay, I guess that's what this is. I guess this is a book. So
It reached out to you.
Yes, they reached out
Wow.
to me. And they asked if I wanted to write, if I had any book ideas. And I said, okay, I guess this writing that I've been doing has finally revealed itself. Because at first I was like, maybe it's a workbook, maybe it's a online workshop, maybe I didn't know what it was going to be. And I was like, okay, I guess it's a book. So received. And I said, sure, I've been working on something. I can formalize it and draft the proposal, and we can go from there. And that's what I did. And I've always been interested in the ways that how we teach and what we teach either enhances or inhibits identity development in students and in teachers. And so I just rode with that. And some of these stories, I was like, okay, clearly I'm thinking in story. So I'll frame identity as narrative and we'll go from there. And then for my dissertation work, I had interviewed all of these, teachers who were taking a class and put their stories together and made one, connected narrative. So I was like, we'll apply that same process. I'll interview some folks. And I pitched the idea, and they asked me to pitch 3 titles, potential titles, and woven together literally came to me right before I emailed the proposal to them. It is number 3 on the list. Because I needed one more. And I was like, I don't have a third one. And so I'm sitting there and I let it go. I was like, you know what, I'll just send it with 2. That's fine. And I was typing the email to send to them. And it just popped in my head, and I just wrote it down, and that's the one that they liked. So I was like, okay. So that's how it happened, and that was the motivation. The writing process was, I started with the interviews. I put my own writing to the side, and then I started with the interviews. I interviewed 12 teachers in all different stages of their career. So some were early stage. One person whom Eva, she was just finished her first year in the classroom, and that was really special. And then I had a bunch of folks who were, in their 20th year or their 25th year. So that was cool. And then folks in the middle, some people who had transitioned out of the classroom, but were still working in school as admin. And then some folks who had completely left and were doing their own thing outside of the formal education system, but were deeply working still in consulting with educators and schools. And so still very connected in that way. And so I wanted all these narratives and these experiences. And I found, I just looked at all the transcripts from each of the interviews, and I started finding these connected threads in all of our stories and just built around them. And then added myself in there and some theory and things like that. And then the most important part of it to me is there are reflection questions, just randomly strewn about so that the reader can pause and sit with. I want to encourage, like, don't just read it, but sit with it. Think about how you're connecting with this. Think about, you know, the similar experiences you've had, the different experiences that you've had. Build your own narrative. After you come from this book, you should have your own complete narrative that you can like look at. And it's, you know, it's never in its final form because we're always in a state of evolution, and development and becoming. But it's a beautiful place to start. And it's a process that I take my undergraduate students through. And I hope it's an emotional journey. My students cry every semester, so I'm sure you will too as you read the book. But that was the process, deeply personal. I felt like I was writing a journal at a lot of points, like you know, formalizing my journal a little bit at certain points. But yeah.
I'm surprised that you didn't want to write a book, just for the simple fact that for anyone that doesn't follow Courtney on Instagram, I mean, she stayed coming with the prompts and all the reflections, and I'm thinking, okay, just based on all this content alone, you could just take some of that and shape it into a book. So I'm pretty sure that was a huge help in putting it together, because you always ask us questions that's forcing us to think and reflect on our practice. So I'm thinking, okay, you had to have used some of that content.
100%. Like I pulled from everywhere. And it was funny because my mom, so, you know, going back to the beginning of our conversation, I'd seen my mother write multiple books. And I was just like, that's a lot of work. Like, I don't have the time to give this what it needs. And so I was deeply resistant to the idea of taking that on at this point in my career, because I was teaching nonstop. I still am. And so before I sent in the signed contract, my mother said, okay, before you email that, I need you to answer one question. Do you want to write a book? And I was like, well, girl, we are so far in this process. She's like, no, you haven't even really started it yet. You're just signing the contract. Once you send that in, you have to write a book. So the question that I need you to answer and maybe sit with for a couple of days, because they're not rushing you to get this in. Do you want to write a book? Because once you send that in, you have to. And I was like, oh no. I sat with that for 24 hours and I was like, yes, I want to write a book. So, but I really had to come to terms with that, because, and I always show people when I talk about it, because I'm always sitting here like, this is how the book started. Just Post-it notes that I stuck on my wall for ideas, and they're color coded because that's how my brain works, but into different categories. But that's how it started. Then I started typing in a Google Doc, and then it evolved into, I would just pick up my voice notes and just record. And that's how it started. And that's actually how the process really continued, because I had to write the book while I was teaching. So I really am like, luckily my mom was like, let's take a minute. Do you want to write a book? Because this journey is going to be intense. And it was, but yeah. I had seen the process, Kwame, so I was like, I don't know. Do I want to? And all y'all were always like, where's the book? Write the book. And I was like, no, I don't know. But it was bursting out of me. It was bursting out of me. And I had to answer that call. So
I would think, I mean, you've already gone through the process of writing a dissertation. It's pretty much the same process.
Yeah.
Same ups and downs. You know, you had to do a lit review. Of course, you had to get a whole bunch of books you're going to make references to throughout. Like, it's almost the same process you had to go through.
Again, which is why I was like, why do this again? You know?
I already did it one time. But you know what? I got to do it again a second time.
Yeah.
But it was the right decision, and I'm glad that you did. I got a couple more questions before we wrap up.
Okay.
First question is, if you can go back in time and talk to your first year teacher self, what would you tell her, knowing what you know about yourself?
I would tell her, don't, I would tell her to relax. I was going to say, don't try too hard, but that's not the exact tone. I don't think she was trying too hard. I just think she was just relax, child. That's what I would tell her. I just think there was just so much pressure that I had on myself at that time. And there was a lot going on around me. And I just let it, I never relaxed enough to like find my footing. And I think that's what I would tell her. There was also stuff going on in my personal life, and I would have let that go because that was part of the reason why she couldn't relax. But the biggest message would be relax, breathe, remember who you are, and I think it would have helped a lot.
Yeah, but letting it go is what I finally learned after going through therapy. Therapy is what got me to a place where I just said, you know what? I gotta let this go. I gotta forgive, because if I don't forgive, I continue to be upset. And it took me almost 40 years to get to that place. So yeah, I hear you when you say that. I hear you.
That probably would have been the other thing I would have told her, is get back in therapy stat. Like, because I had stopped therapy for years at that point, and I would have been like, get back. That would have probably been, so get back in therapy, relax. Like, that would have been the first one. Yeah,
that's some real talk. And then, how does Dr. Courtney Elizabeth Rose stay true to the teacher in her?
This is always my favorite question on your show. Always. These days she's reconnecting with her body. There's a whole chapter in the book where I talk about how the relationship between my body broke down due to a lot of stuff that was going on. And that made it challenging for me to stay true to myself, because, when it's all, listen, I'm going to kill y'all with the analogies, but it's all woven together, right? Our men, all of the things. And my physical is really breaking down. So these days, I have really committed to moving joyfully, whether that's dance, working out, going for a walk, that's really been a game changer in staying true to who I am, because when I'm moving, it's also freeing up a lot of energy that I use to like think and overthink about things. And I find that I'm able to be inspired and to see through problems that have been trying to navigate, and also to find inspiration for my work, and how to bring some of the joy that I'm feeling while I'm moving into that space. And I've actually developed a number of things through my movement practice. I've done a lot of yoga this year, a lot of dance this year, and a lot of walking, and all of that has the messages that I've received through that work has also made its way into my teaching. And so I think it's just reminded me how much joy needs to be in my work, and how much joy used to live in me, and that I need to stay connected to that as much as possible. So that is how I've been staying true lately, is just staying committed to joyful movement and connection with my body.
And I thank you for just being so vulnerable and just sharing that part of your journey and just your whole story. Like I said off camera, I'm excited to have you come back to just share how things have gone. I'm also so happy that I finally got a chance to meet you in person.
Yes.
After 3-4 years of being virtual and just exchanging DMs and IG posts with each other, to finally be able to meet at the Hip Hop Ed conference earlier this year was just super dope. And then to be able to collaborate on an Ed Week article, which y'all need to check out, about supporting identity in the classroom on the Classroom Q&A blog. Make sure y'all check that out, please. But it's just been dope to really be able to work with you in these different spaces. So I thank you, and I can't wait to just see this book skyrocket and become a best-selling book and just do wonderful things.
Well, thank you. This has been such a pleasure. It's been such a great journey, and to get to talk about it here with you on this platform is just incredible, because I told you I assign your podcast every single semester. So because it's just, I think the way that you highlight teachers and their development and their work, and it humanizes the work in such a powerful way, and it's necessary for my students who are either going into or already in the classroom to engage with that as often as possible. So I take it very seriously.
And I appreciate you for just being a real one and continuing to support this platform. Like I always tell people, educators are multifaceted. There's so much about us that's good, but also not so good. But that's all of who we are, and the world needs to know that.
Mm-hmm.
Be transparent about those truths, and that's all we try to do in this space. So I thank you for contributing to that.
Yes.
And we're gonna have to do this again sometime in 2024, especially once my book comes out, because I'm already starting to think of some parallels between themes where we might have to have another conversation about the books and just really do that deep dive.
Anytime.
All right. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Congratulations again. And please let people know how to connect with you, and also how to get a copy of Woven Together. And do you have a book near you? Do you have it around?
You know what, Kwame? I'm the worst, because this is how new the journey is. Listen, don't judge me. Anyone watching, the listeners, they weren't. But if you're watching, please don't judge me, because I realized it as soon as you pulled me in to the video, and I was like, oh no, I forgot to grab one from the room. But so you can follow me at Dr. Courtney Rose on all platforms, X, Twitter, what are we calling it? Instagram, and Threads, although I'm not as vocal on Threads as I used to be. And then I'm on LinkedIn as well, Dr. Courtney Rose, or I think Courtney E. Rose. And then to get the book, it's pretty much everywhere. So you can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, directly from my publisher, Wiley. It's also at Target, Walmart, I believe, online. And you can find all of those links in one easy to find location. Thank you, Courtney, for doing that up. One easy to find location on my website, drcourtneyrose.com. And for those of you who purchased the book by December 31st, I am offering a free workshop where we'll begin to build these narratives and then talk about how we can work from there to create some of these larger projects like workshops, workbooks, or even your own book if that's what you're interested in. So I will be doing actually releasing that on the 15th. So it's already out, and by the time this is released, you'll already have access to that. But you have to purchase the book by December 31st.
All right, so here's a image of the book cover in case people need to know how it looks.
Yes.
So I'm gonna help you out, sis. I'm gonna help you out.
Look at the community. Thank you for that.
Come on now, you know how I do. So here's the book, Woven Together: How Unpacking Your Teacher Identity Creates a Stronger Learning Community. Much needed book in these streets. Make sure you support Dr. Rose in this new author journey. And most importantly, like I said, just thank you again for just being a real one. And we're going to talk soon.
Yes, thank you for having me.
All right, take care.
Bye.
All right, y'all. So we're going to end another fantastic episode of Identity Talk for Educators Live. And as always, I wish you a good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. And we're going to do this again another time. Peace out, y'all.